Harborview Center in March of 1997. Prior to that, he owned and operated Metro Catering Company in Tampa, but Chef Terzak's experience reaches far outside the Tampa Bay area. He was executive chef at the American Stanhope Hotel on 5th Avenue in New York, and Gordon's, one of Chicago Magazine's top 10 restaurants in the Windy City. He owned 5 restaurants in Chicago. Among them, Terzak's, Chameleon, Ketchup, and Tamales. He's also consulted for top-rated restaurants in Florida, Virginia, Chicago, and New York. Chef Terzak studied culinary arts at Du Maupert School of French Cooking in Glenview, Illinois, and was acknowledged by Food and Wine magazine as one of the top 60 chefs in America. For years, he hosted the cable TV series Great American Cookout, but now he's the host of What's Cooking, Harborview?
Hello again, and welcome to another edition of What's Cooking, Harborview. Now, today I have a very special show lined up for you. It's the show of all about soups and their definitions. And we have 4 soups and 4 categories of soup that I'm going to show you how to make today. We are going to spend 15 minutes together on the stove with the soup pots first. And those 4 soups are roast corn chowder. We're going to talk about chowders. Cream of broccoli soup. We're going to talk about cream soups. Shrimp bisque soup. We're going to talk about bisque soups and what they are and their definitions. And then we're going to talk about a category of soup called purees, which is usually beans and things of this nature. And we're going to make a black bean soup. These are all kind of favorite classic traditionals, and we're going to give you a nice definition and really good recipes. So, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's go back to the stove for 15 minutes together and put together these 4 soups and talk about how they're made and what their definitions are. Come on. Alrighty, welcome to my stove. Now, I told you we were going to do 4 different soups, and I kind of have the processes of each one done so that I can compact this all into a tricky 30-minute television shot. Now, the first soup we're going to talk about and do is the roast corn chowder. And what I did here was I rendered a couple of pounds of bacon in a pot, and I shucked some fresh corn, and I toasted it in the oven. And I toasted the cobs nice and brown, and I made chicken stock, which I'm using for all these soups, and I'm simmering the roasted cobs in the stock to make a roasted cob chicken stock for the corn chowder. Okay, now, what we're going to do is we rendered the bacon, and now we're going to saute the onion on top of it. And I want to give you a little definition information about these soups as we're going along. First, a chowder is always a broth soup. Now, some people say, wait a minute, New England clam chowder, that's been telling me for years that it can be thick. Well, that's a different category of soups the New England clam chowder is in, and we call that regional or miscellaneous. You know, there's other regional and miscellaneous is like gazpacho soup or onion soup or mussel Billy B soup from Paris, which kind of has a little category of its own, even though it does sort of fall within the basic parameters of one of these 4 preparations, because these 4 preparations, with consommé being put aside as maybe a 5th category, are the only types of soups in terms of categories and techniques that there are. Everything kind of stems from these 4. So getting back to the chowder definition, chowder is always a brothy soup with food in it, and it's never thick, and it is never thickened. And it's probably the oldest type of soup known to man. If you're dating back into all recorded history of cooking, no matter what country you're in, chowder is the one thing that they all have, which is food boiled in a pot with water, basically. So, getting back to our roast corn chowder, I've got my rendered bacon, my mushrooms, and my diced onion, and I'm going to put a little red pepper in here. And by the way, I have some very nice detailed recipes for you on the city website of all 4 of these soups and their definitions and how to make these exact recipes proportioned. So if you need that recipe, you go on over there and get it. And if you can't get it through the website, then you mail me a self-addressed stamped envelope and I'll send them to you, no problem. So now I'm going to put a little bit of dried leaf thyme on top of my veg, and I'm going to let that cook. And I'm going to throw a little bit of pepper on there. And just a touch of salt. Alrighty. Now, that's cooked very quickly. Now, all we're going to do is add a little bit of garlic to this. Now, this is a very simple soup, but a very delicious soup. And you will find, as you see what we're doing in here today, that most of these are kind of simple, but they do require your attention in specific ways in order to get those bursts of flavor and identity that you're looking for in your soup. Now, we'll cook a little bit of garlic in here quickly because we do not want to burn our garlic and permeate the entire soup with this flavor of burnt garlic. And we are going to get rid of those cobs. I just had those here so I can show you what they look like. Now we're going to put our corn kernels that we toasted in the oven at about 350 degrees for, about 45 minutes or so. We're going to throw them in there, and they're going to have that nice roasty, toasty flavor there now. And let's give that a little swirl. Now we're going to take our cob stock, which is our chicken cob stock. I've been simmering them, simmered those browned cobs, rather, in there. We're going to pour that right on there. There you go. Now, we're going to simmer that for approximately about half an hour or so. What we're going to do is we're going to get all these soups done, and then we're going to take a half an hour break, and we're going to let them all cook because we don't have time to film all that. And then we'll come back and show you. I'll show you how each one is finished and put inside the bowl and garnished a little bit. So that's the chowder, and we've got that going now. So let's kind of put that chowder back here, and let's move on to the black bean soup, which I have right here. This is a similar soup, and you'll notice a lot of similarities in both the stock, the vegetables, and the seasonings. The primary ingredients and the technique applications is what generally changes from soup to soup that makes them distinctive. Now, the chowder, we're just going to simmer that, so I'm going to turn that down just a touch. Now, to the black bean, which is the category of puree, if you will. And what I did here was I rendered some bacon again. I have two soups with bacon in them today. And then I added the celery, carrots, and onions to the black bean rendered bacon. And now I'm going to add a little bit of garlic to that. Or a lot of garlic, whatever you happen to want. You are going to love these recipes, by the way. They are so good. These are all soups that I have made over and over and over and over again and have just perfected the way they taste. I think you're going to love them. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of dried leaf thyme in this one also. And a little bit of pepper in this one here also. Now, what I have here is I have my black beans that I soaked overnight in cold water. And you want to do that because it expedites the amount of time that it takes to make the soup. Otherwise, you'll be up here 3 times as long babysitting this pot, and that you don't want to do. I had a couple of pounds of black beans here is what you need. Okay? Let's give that a little stir. This is certainly the time of year to be doing this, I would say, too. Okay, now, I got my chicken stock back here. Now, you can use, of course, smoked ham hock stock, or you could use beef stock, or you could use a combination of any of these in this particular soup, no problem. As you could with the roast corn chowder. I like to give you specific recipes, but I also want to tell you that you can make combinations and do the things that you need to do to accommodate what's in your refrigerator or what you're used to doing or you feel most comfortable with. It's hard to make good food out of things that you're not comfortable with, and so you use the stocks that you think you like. But these are good ones, the ones that I'm recommending to you. Okay, so now there's your bean soup, and we're going to let that simmer for a while. And there's going to be, of course, a moderately complex finishing process with each one of these soups that you're going to want to stay tuned to see later. Otherwise, you'll never get the full impact of the soup. Now, here we're going to do the shrimp bisque. Now, but before I do that, let me just complete the definition of that bean puree, or any puree, and that's when the soup has part of it pureed, and it's usually a dried bean style soup or sweet pea or split pea or lentil, that part of the soup is pureed and part of the soup still has the food in it. That, like this here, we're going to puree only part of that soup. But it will be pureed, and it is usually done with starchy style vegetables or beans. Alrighty, now, back to the bisque. What I did here was I have, again, the mirepoix, or the celery, carrots, and onions, however you'd like to refer to it. The common referral to celery, carrots, and onions within the cooking industry is this is called mirepoix. Now, we are going to put a little bit of pepper. We cook that in some whole butter with a little bit of parsley roots. So there's celery, carrots, onions, parsley roots, whole butter so far. Okay? And we're going to put a little bit of dried leaf thyme in that also. And we're going to put a little bit of salt in that. Now that that's kind of cooked and tender, what we're going to do is we're going to add raw shrimp to it. Now, you remember, you cannot make bisque soup with cooked shrimp because you must have the release of the liquids from the shrimp when they're cooking into the soup in order to capture that flavor you're looking for. So now we're going to take this is what you call a 50 to 70 count shrimp. You certainly don't need to use a big shrimp when you're making this, okay? Because you don't need to add the added expense of doing that. But just remember, you must have shrimp in order to make shrimp bisque. You can't make it with shrimp flavor or shrimp shells, although you can, but it might taste like shrimp shells instead of shrimp meat, which is what you want. Now, we're going to cook the shrimp just for a couple minutes, long enough for it to get cooked. Meanwhile, while that's cooking, and we're going to be reducing some white wine on this in a couple of minutes, we're going to switch over to the broccoli soup, and we're going to get that going. But a quick definition now for bisque soup, which is the significant aspect of understanding how they're made from soup to soup. I'd say the four typical bisques that are made would be shrimp, lobster, oyster, and crayfish. Crab and the clam, they don't respond well to the pureeing process that this is going to go through. And the crab only comes cooked anyway. You can't buy it raw, and you really need a raw shellfish in order to make a bisque. So, although they both work well in making cream soups out of, so we're not going to set them aside as if we don't want them. Okay, now, this shrimp is cooked enough. I'll tell you what, let's start a little bit of white wine reduction on that. Now, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to hit this with the garlic. Gotta have garlic in here. Or a lot of garlic, depends how you want it. Don't put too much garlic because you want it to taste like shrimp, not garlic. But, I'd say the primary components in defining the shrimp bisque would probably be things that are mandatory for the soup to be called a bisque, contrary to what you may hear from the Campbell Soup Company, who would obviously call anything a bisque in order to sell it, and I don't blame them for that. Don't misunderstand me. They're doing a great job. But a shrimp is qualified by the fact that, number one, it's made with shellfish, and number two, it's made with white wine, white stock, and this mirepoix, or celery, carrots, and onions, if you will. Other variations that go into it may change, but those four elements will not change. It's getting hot over here. Okay, now we're going to pour the white wine on here. We're going to pour a couple of cups on here. Like so. And we're going to let that reduce in the back now. Now, when I say reduce, I mean we're going to boil away the excess water. Because when you boil things that have, quote, stock in them or other flavors that have been imparted to the liquid, when it boils, the only thing that leaves that pot is water. Everything else stays there. Now, cream of broccoli soup. Let's move to that. I've got some sauteed onions and a little bit of sauteed celery and some fresh broccoli stems and florets. I made sure, of course, that I didn't use the base of the stems of the broccoli because it's a little too woody and difficult to puree. And then you end up with this stringy business in your soup. So what I have here is, I'm going to get my pot handle down back there. There we go. I've got broccoli, onions, and celery sauteed in a little bit of butter. Now, I'm going to throw a little bit of chicken stock in there. There you go. And we're going to talk real quick about the definition of cream soup, but we're also going to talk about how these different soups are thickened or not thickened, and this is a key element in understanding how to make soup. Now, with the broccoli, what we're going to do, we're going to take some blanched, peeled potatoes, and we're going to put them in the soup. And then later, when we puree this soup, which is what we're going to do, the potato starch, coupled with the mass of the food that's pureed in there, which is the broccoli and the onions and celery, that will thicken it. Now, there, of course, are plenty of schools of thought as to how you might thicken this, and this is one that I'm recommending after having made it for so long. The potato starch is nice and clean, and it's more veggie to like, too. Okay. Now we're going to let that simmer. And there's only one more little thing we're doing back here, and we're going to define the cream soups for you first, and then we're going to set the stock that we're going to use on the shrimp bisque on this, and we're going to let all three of these cook, and then we're going to come back in a half an hour or so. But first, let's finish talking about the definition of the broccoli soup, or the cream soup, if you will. Excuse me. Now, this is probably the most complicated soup to define in terms of necessary components, because over the years, since cream soups were more or less established by the French, the varieties of acceptable techniques and applications in making them is just huge. So you can make cream soup probably 10 different ways and have it all be correct. The important thing now, I think, is that it tastes good and that it's creamy. You don't have to be all cream. It can just have a little bit of cream added to it so it appears to be creamy. It can be pureed, but it doesn't have to be. But it does have to be thickened with something, because it is not a chowder now. And so, in defining the cream soup, my best advice to you would be that you don't make it all dairy products with a little bit of food. Make it mainly stock that's thickened and then creamed a little bit at the end. All right, now we're going to let that simmer a little bit. And now finally, the last thing we're going to do before we set all this to continue cooking and before we come back to finish it is we are going to add the stock to the bisque. The white wine is reduced enough to satisfy me at this point, which is about 50%. Now remember, I mentioned something to you about reducing, and that was that only the water will evaporate. But remember one more thing. When you're reducing, you are concentrating the flavor. Now we're going to put a little bit of chicken stock on here, on the shrimp, like so. And the thickening agent for the bisque soup is going to be blanched white rice. So we're going to throw a little bit of white rice in here right now. There you go. We can always add more if we want to thicken it up later. Don't forget now. Okay. Now there you have it. There's your 4 soup categories. They're all cooking. Your cream of broccoli, your shrimp bisque, your black bean, and your roast corn chowder. We're going to take about a half an hour break, and then we're going to come back, and I'm going to show you how each one of these is finished and put in the bowl and garnished, and you're going to love it. Okay, the easiest and the fastest one that we're going to finish first is the roast corn chowder. And that's what I got right here. This simmered for about a half an hour, like I said. And then the only thing I've done to this soup, since you saw it on the stove a few minutes ago, was I added a little bit of sliced okra that I washed really well, so it didn't make the soup real slimy, which it has a tendency to do, that okra. And the other thing I've done is I've taken off excess fat off the top of the soup with a ladle like this, and I discard that. You see, that's called skimming the soup, which is what you need to do to all soups, because the things that rise to the surface are insoluble with water, and they tend to make the soup gloppy or fatty or whatever the case may be, depending on what you're skimming off. Now, so I put a little bit of okra in there, and I seasoned it with a little bit of salt and pepper. Now we're just going to put a splash of cream in there so it has a little creamy effect to it. And it looks nice. It looks real nice. It's got lots of nice colors, and there's just enough food in here. You don't want to put too much food in here. Somebody might confuse your chowder with a stew. You don't want that. And you want to put enough food so that they don't think it's thin. All right? This is the kind of dish, though, that you can almost eat as a main dish. So now we're just going to ladle some of it, making sure we get the right amount of food into a soup plate, which is what this is That's because it's got the name soup plate because it's the rim is so wide, it's like part plate and part soup bowl, so it's a soup plate. And there's your corn chowder, and then we'll just put a little bit of chopped parsley on there, and that's a done deal. Voila. If you get a chance to make this, you will enjoy it. And next, we are going to bring out the black bean soup. Okay, by the way, I had some of that corn chowder a second ago in between doing these two things. It was very good. You'd love it. But enough of fanning my ego. Let's get right back to the black bean soup, if we will. Now, what I've done is I cooked the black bean soup up here on the stove, like we talked about, and then, again, I skimmed a little bit of the fat off, which we'll take a little bit more off of there still. Then I seasoned it a little bit with salt and pepper. Then I took about a third of the soup and I put it in this pot. And I'm using this little domestic version of what we call a Rambo, if you will. We have a larger one here that we use. And then you proceed to puree that, and then you add it back into this soup, and it gives the soup a little bit more body, you see? It gives it the necessary body, not a little bit more body. Now, don't misunderstand me. You can not puree any of this soup. It's more of a bean chowder then, in which case you got a bean chowder. You might want to thin it down a little bit more than this recipe might call for in order to do that, and to call it that. But since we are making the puree and demonstrating that for you today, let's just now take the puree that we have and pour it back into the soup, you see? And we'll give that a mix. This is an original American classic, the black bean soup, by the way. Although bean soups and puree soups have been made in Europe, where most of these things were codified for years, this was perfected and made famous in the United States. Now, there we got that mixed together. Let me just give that a little taste real quick. This is nice soup. And I know I had bacon in the other soup and bacon in this soup, but it goes well in both of these soups. Now, of course, you can use, like I said, smoked ham hocks and make a smoked ham hock stock for this or the other one. And then again, there's always the option of putting diced ham in here for garnish too, if you'd like, or sprinkling it on top when you're done. So, let's just ladle some of this into our soup plate. Now you'll notice that that's not too thick. You see, you don't want it pasty so you can stand a knife up in it. Now traditionally, this dish is garnished with sour cream, onion, and a little bit of parsley. So we're going to put a little dollop of sour cream in the middle. And we're going to put a little bit of scallion on here. You can go with like purple onion or scallion. And just for fun, we're going to throw a little bit of red pepper on there for color. And of course, we can put a little bacon, like I said, or ham on that. And there, ladies and gentlemen, you have classic American black bean. And I'm going to be back in 1 second with how to finish the shrimp bisque. Voila. Alrighty, as I promised you, the shrimp bisque. Now, one of the additions to all bisque soups is burnt brandy. And you'll notice that behind me, there's a saucepan with brandy that's all flaming and burning. Now, this process is called burning off the alcohol, and then using what's left to flavor it, like salt or pepper is used at the end of the bisque. And what's left is concentrated old white wine. So you want to make sure you want to buy a cheap brandy to do this with, because they all taste the same once you burn the alcohol off. So we'll let that burn for a second. And what I did was I took the bisque from the stove where we had it earlier, and I pureed it again with this little zapper until it's completely pureed. Now, if you think it's too thick, maybe you added too much rice, and you add a little bit of stock to it to thin it off. But this soup traditionally always gets 2 ounces of butter per quart of soup pureed into it. Now, most people use cayenne pepper for this, and don't want to start any fires back there, you know. Cayenne pepper is traditionally used, but we're going to put a little black pepper in it today, and we're going to put a little bit of cream in it. Now, if the texture of your soup is where you want it to be already, you might want to reduce the cream by 50% before you even add it to it, so it'll be a little thicker. But since my texture was right where kind of it needed to be for me to add the straight cream to it, I didn't reduce the cream. So now we're going to add a little bit of pepper, and the brandy's done. We're going to throw the brandy in there. Thank you, Joanne. Boom, just like that. It's like a little seasoning agent, the burnt brandy. And we're going to put some salt in there. Now, a lot of cooks put tomato in the bisque, and it certainly is not a requirement. Just remember, as every element that you add to a bisque soup ultimately breaks down the essence of the flavor of the shellfish. So you want to kind of almost have as few ingredients as possible in it. This soup is very good. I shouldn't be saying that, though. I need witnesses here, you know? Okay. Actually, I don't. It's good. You can take my word for it. Alrighty. That is some darn good soup. Now, what I did is I got a little cooked shrimp here. And we're just going to ladle that bisque soup in there like that. And voila, we're going to hit this with a little parsley. And, of course, you want to make some plain whipped cream that has salt and pepper and some herbs in it instead of sugar that you might normally use for a dessert type thing. You can certainly put a little bit of that on top just before you serve it. Voila, shrimp bisque. I hope you enjoy that. I'll be right back with the cream of broccoli. We are back with the coup de grace, the cream of broccoli soup, which was all the special garnishes. We haven't got to that yet. Now, what I did was, since we've cooked the broccoli soup back there, and hopefully you saw that process, I pureed it again with a little blender. Now, you keep in mind, of course, that you can use a regular stationary blender, put the soup in it, and then put it back in the pot, of course. This is just a portable version of a stationary. All right, now, again, we're going to butter the soup with 2 ounces of butter per quart of soup. So we're going to throw a little bit of butter in there. And we're going to put a little bit of cream in here just to make it creamy like we talked about earlier. And again, you want to make sure your texture, not too thin, not too thick, and you may have to adjust it. A little more potato, add a little bit of stock to thin it out, whatever the case may be. Now, cream soups traditionally get nutmeg, salt, and pepper added to them. So we're going to put a little bit of nutmeg in here. And you got to be careful with nutmeg because the whole soup can end up tasting like nutmeg if you put a little too much in. And let's put a little bit of pepper in here. And we'll put a little bit of salt in here. And let's give that a little taste. It's very good, very good. Alrighty, now we are going to get some of this broccoli soup into the bowl. I need a ladle here. Hold on a second. Yeah, I think this is just a perfect texture here, too, the way it is, see? Not too thick, not too thin. You know all them jokes about the thin soups and everything, you know, we don't need that. Okay, there's your soup, and now we're going to put a little bit of walnuts on top. Broccoli and walnuts kind of goes together, and we're going to put a little bit of gorgonzola cheese or some kind of blue cheese, okay? On top like so. Not too much. We don't want the thing to taste like cheese. And then just for color, because it's so nice and green, we're just going to sprinkle a little bit of red pepper again like we did that other one. And then finally, a little bit of chopped parsley. And that's all I'm so sorry to say, that's all the time I have today to show you how to make soup and tell you about it. And I could go on and on and on with this. But for now, thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed my soup class. And I'll see you next month. Have a great month.